Hey friends, how are you all? I hope you all are doing great. So here's another interesting story of Naruto. What if Naruto was illegitimate son of Zeus and Artemis? This story doesn't have any parts. If you want to see more stuff like this, please leave a like, do a comment, and also share with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe this channel, and also do check the talented author of this captivating story. Naruto's Life with the Gods by Hyperpixel. Author's name is mentioned in description box. So let's begin. In a dense forest in the middle of upstate New York is a clearing that has a small, but cozy 2-story house. It is the only house within a 10-mile radius, away from the urban city, making it a very peaceful and secluded place. As dawn approached, the rays of sunlight hit one of the windows of the house, where 2 people were currently sleeping in. "HNN, stupid son," grumbled a boy, who looked to be around the age of 10 as he tried to continue and stay asleep, but failed to do so as the rays of sunlight was upon him. The boy tried to turn to face the other side, but had trouble doing so. He was currently being held in place by a beautiful woman who looked to be in her mid-20s, with a figure that women would die for, and large S that could be suffocated in. She has crimson hair that reached the small of her back, and it was something the boy appreciated greatly. Currently, said woman was hugging the boy from the back, with her S pushing against his back and head, effectively trapping him and preventing him from moving in any direction. "Irene," whined the boy as he struggled against her arms. He was now fully awake and now wanted to get out of her grasp so he could go to the bathroom. The now named Irene merely hugged the boy closer to herself and sighed happily, content with the position, and continued sleeping. Seeing that she had no intention of waking up anytime soon, the boy continued his attempts of trying to break free in hopes of his movement to wake her up. Irene moaned at the continuous movement, as she felt it against her S, and since it continued to happen, she opened her eyes to show her beautiful brown orbs, and she looked at the struggling figure that she was currently hugging. Moving her head towards the boy's left ear, Irene lowly and seductively spoke in his ear. "Naruto," purred Irene as she continued to hold on to the boy and watched as he tried to break free. She knew that he could easily break free of her hold, but that would most likely cause some damage within the room, and he didn't want that to happen. After all, this house was their home and he wanted it to stay intact. "Irene, please let go. I need to go the bathroom," whined the now named Naruto. He was able to turn around within her arms and pouted at her. Looking at him, Irene couldn't help but find him to absolutely adorable and lovable. His bright sun-kissed hair, shining cerulean eyes, 3 whisker marks on both sides of his cheeks, and those kissable pink lips made him the cutest man around. No other male could compare to him, and she had no intention of ever leaving him. Right now, he was a cute little Shota boy that she intended on capitalizing on at the moment, as he could change forms anytime he wanted. "Irene, I said your name so many times already. I need to go," shouted Naruto, breaking Irene from her trance, and she giggled. Okay, my cute master." Naruto merely blushed at being called that, still shy at being called that even though they have been living together for a long time. Giggling at his blush, Irene continued, "And I'm going with you as well. After all, it is my duty to serve my master," shouted Irene as she nodded her head in approval at what she said. I can go by myself. I don't need your help," shouted Naruto, his blush increasing to reach the colors of her hair. Tears welled within Irene's eyes as she used one of her tricks that Naruto always fell for. The fake crying was always powerful against him. "My master doesn't love me anymore," whispered Irene as she continued with her fake crying act. And of course Naruto fell for it. Hey, don't cry. It isn't even a big deal. And I do love you," he shouted, while stuttering when he said he loved her. His blush by them covered his face, and he felt like he could crawl into a hole and stay there for the rest of his life. It was only the morning and he already felt so embered. Irene instantly stopped her fake crying when Naruto showed her his affection in his cute way. Squealing in delight, Irene merely pushed Naruto deeper into her S, effectively smothering him and prevented him from getting any air. "Oh, you're so cute. That's it. I'm going into the bathroom with you and that is final. It is my duty as your servant and we need our skinship time, shouted Irene as she didn't wait for Naruto to protest and bolted towards the bathroom. And we have a lot of time as well. Urza after all is making breakfast today with Rangaku and Yoruichi coming back today as well. So we have plenty of time my master, whispered Irene into Naruto's ear. Said master merely blushed bright red again and with that they were both in the bathroom, the door closing behind them. Moans would have been heard throughout the entire house if not for the silencing seals placed within the bat room. Outside the room and down the stairs was the kitchen where another woman who looked to be in her early 20s with beautiful crimson hair, brown eyes, and a voluptuous figure currently resided as she was currently cooking breakfast for her master. She was dressed in a white blouse and a blue skirt with an orange apron with a chibi fox graphic covering her clothing. Said woman was currently humming a tune as she smiled at her work and started to finish prepping the food. Her smile widened as she finished making breakfast, took off her apron, and made her way towards the dining room, which was right next to kitchen. The dining table was shaped in a long rectangle made out of beautiful oak. There were 2 chairs on both sides of the table and another chair that resided at the helm of the table. The beautiful redhead placed 3 plates of breakfast, 1 at the helm, and the other 2 on either side of it. Finishing her task, the redhead made her way towards the stairs to call out the other 2. Naruto, Irene, breakfast is ready, come down, shouted the redhead, as she made her way back to the kitchen to finish cleaning up. 5 minutes later, 1 set of footsteps made its way downstairs and towards the dining room. The redhead in the kitchen finished cleaning and made her way towards the dining room where she was met with something that wasn't unexpected. Sister, please let go of master so he can eat, and please get dressed, sighed the redhead as Irene pouted at her little sister. Irene currently had a towel wrapped around her body, which did very little to cover her and she was currently holding onto the blushing blonde who was a little dazed by events that happened in the bathroom. Oh you're no fun Urza. Besides, I'm sure Naru likes me dressed like this. After all, we had a fun time in the bathroom and he enjoyed the service I gave him. Right Naru, said Irene, as Naruto further blushed in her arms. The blonde was always vulnerable to the woman's advances and to prevent further teasing, he resorted to not give her an answer. Sister, shouted the now named Urza as she lightly blushed at the implication. She shook her head and sighed. Why was her older sister such a pervert with their master? Huffing, Irene let go of Naruto as he sat down at the helm of the table, and he motioned for the other 2 to sit down. Don't be like that Urza. After all, I know you enjoy Naru just as much as I do, huffed Irene as she used her magic to dress into a white sundress that hugged all her curves in the right way. Urza merely blushed a deep shade of red, but didn't deny what her sister said because it was true. Okay, let's eat Urza's amazing food, said Naruto as started to devour the food Urza made for them. Said mentioned redhead blushed at her master's praise and she started to eat as well. As they continued to eat breakfast, Naruto asked Irene about their other 2 residents. Irene, do you know when Rangaku and Yoruichi are coming back from their mission? Questioned Naruto. They were only gone for a couple of days and he knew they could take care of themselves, but he's still worried. Yes, I received a message from them after our bathroom time that they were arriving in a few hours, said Irene. Nodding at her answer, Naruto finished his breakfast. Ah, that was great Urza. You always cook good food, sighed Naruto as he patted his stomach in satisfaction. His praise caused Urza to blush again as she internally shouted in victory. The endless amount of hours she put into refining her cooking skills paid off in the end since she always satisfied her master in the food department. What about me Naru? Don't I make good food too? Pouted Irene. She knew it wasn't her day to cook, but still felt a little jealous at her master praising Urza. Naruto merely titled his head at her question, but nodded and smiled. Of course you make good food too, beamed Naruto. His smile left the 2 redheads blushing. The fact that he was in his child form made it all the more dazzling and cute, as if entrancing them in some sort of spell. How about we get some dessert when Rangaku and Yoruichi return? I'm in the mood for some and we can go to your favorite bakeries to get them. Smiled Naruto, and before he could blink, the redheads immediately glomped the boy, hugging the dear life out of him. Oh, you're the best master ever. Always spoiling us. I love you so much, Naru. Screamed Irene in delight as she and Urza hugged Naruto, their large S covering his head. I love you too, Naru, whispered Urza, blushing lightly at displaying her affection for her master. She and her sister loved desserts, more specifically strawberry cake, and the fact that they would be going to their favorite bakeries with their master made it the perfect combo. As they continued to smother the blonde, another presence was appearing in their home, causing Urza and Irene to stand up, intent on protecting their master. A light shined in the dining room, and a figure emerged from the light. A male with blonde curly hair, blue hair with a lean, but muscular running figure emerged. He is wearing shoes with wings on the outer sides of his feet and held a staff in one arm with two snakes circling it. Hey Naruto, Irene, Urza. Greeted the male as Irene and Urza lowered their guards in front of the male and greeted him as well. Naruto, having recovered from the suffocation of the heavenly pillows, smiled at the male and waved his arm at him. Hey Hermes, whatcha doing here? Smiled Naruto as the now revealed Hermes smiled at the fellow blonde and made his way towards him. I gotta take you to Olympus. Zeus's orders, and he won't take no for an answer right now, as it's a pretty important matter, said Hermes, causing Naruto to sigh at that. The blonde boy hoped this would be quick so he could get back home when Rangaku and Yoruichi returned. All right, sighed Naruto. How long will this take exactly? I want to get home as soon as possible, Hermes merely sighed. Well, I'm not too sure how long this one will take, but don't be too surprised if it's longer than usual, said Hermes as Naruto's eyes slightly widened at the implication. Something bad must have happened on Olympus for Hermes to say that. Meetings on Olympus never really took too long, so this was concerning. Very well, sighed Naruto, as he walked towards Hermes so he could take him to Olympus. I will try to come back as soon as possible so we can go get some dessert, okay? Smiled Naruto, causing Irene and Urza to smile back and nod. Bidding them farewell, Hermes teleported him and Naruto to Olympus. Olympus. Hermes teleported himself and Naruto on Olympus, where they stood in front of marble doors that towered over them, easily being over 20 feet high. Hermes walked towards the doors and pushed them open, Naruto following behind, and the moment he went in, the events that were happening caused him to internally sigh. He is currently in the throne room where the Olympians were situated in, and right now, it was more or less the same thing every time he entered. A mess. A tall man with shoulder-length white hair and a white beard was wearing a white lined striped suit and dress shoes. He's a muscular man, and currently, he was arguing with another muscular man who had short, jet black hair, a black beard, and wore a button-up tropical shirt with Bermuda shorts and sandals. They are Zeus, the king of Olympus and the god of the sky, and Poseidon, the god of seas and storms respectively. On the left of Zeus, from Naruto's viewpoint, is a beautiful woman with luscious brown locks that reached all the way down to the mid of her back. Her current attire consists of a white chiton that strains against her large chest and ran all the way down to her feet, as well as white slippers. Her stunning brown eyes is currently fixated to the woman next to her as the two were idly chatting. The woman she is speaking to is also very stunning, with long golden hair that ran all the way down to her back. Her lime green dress also strained against her large S and ran all the way down to her feet, as well as bright yellow slippers to accommodate her bright theme. They are Hera, the queen of Olympus and the goddess of marriage and motherhood, and Demeter, the goddess of agriculture and fertility respectively. Although Hera is the queen, she and Zeus had long been divorced due to Hera finally cutting it off due to Zeus's constant cheating and infidelity. Next to Demeter is a male who looked to be out cold, snoring throughout all the noise that permeated throughout the throne room. He looks to be a drunkard, wearing a yellow button-up with none of the buttons buttoned, as well as a dark gray undershirt. He wore khaki cargo shorts and sandals. His messy black hair and unshaven beard added the overall appearance of a deadbeat drunkard. He is Dionysus, the god of wine and madness. Next to Dionysus is a beautiful brunette talking to another woman next to her. The brunette has long, luscious hair that reached the mid of her back and long gray robes that flowed all the way down to her feet. Her most noticeable feature were her storm gray eyes that looked like it could pierce through anything. The woman she is currently talking to has long auburn hair, reaching the mid of her back, and she is wearing a black tunic, dark, cargo pants, and knee-high boots, fitting for a hunter. They are Athena, the goddess of wisdom, strategy, and warfare, and Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, wilderness, and the moon. To the right of Poseidon is a gruff-looking black-haired man, strong and well-built as if fit for war. His attire consists of a long, black trench coat, black sungles, black pants, and black is currently sharpening a knife with another knife, waiting for the meeting to start. He is Ares, the god of war. Next to Ares is an absolutely stunning woman, one that rivals Hera and Demeter in the looks department. Her long crimson hair is currently wrapped in a neat bun, and her bright blue orbs is currently fixated in a book filled with notes. One of the notes fell on the floor, and it looked to be 2 words and a heart in between them. Her long white dress also strained against her bountiful chest. This is Aphrodite, the goddess of love, lust, and beauty. And the appearance she is appearing as in front of all the gods and goddesses in the room is one that perhaps appeals to a certain young blonde boy. Next to Aphrodite is a disfigured male with a misshapen head, shoulders of different heights, a metal brace on his right leg, greasy shoulder-length Avian hair, a scraggy bear, and bushy brows. He currently is wearing a blacksmith's apron, long cargo pants, and boots, which gave him the look of a laborer. He is Hephaestus, the god of forges and blacksmiths, and he is too occupied with his trinkets to care about anything else happening in the room. Next to him is a handsome muscular man with golden blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and perhaps the brightest and whitest teeth ever seen. His white chiton wrapped around his body, exposing a peck and reached down to his mid-thighs. He is Apollo, the god of the sun, healing, and poetry. He is currently on what looks to be a mortal phone, scrolling through it with a bored look on his face. The last throne that is currently empty belongs to Hermes, who was still at the center of the throne room, and he gestured Naruto to come forward. As Naruto made his way towards the middle, he was greeted with the sight of bonfire with the small flame. A young woman, with the appearance of a 12-year-old, was tending to the flames. Her black hair tied in a ponytail and her simple brown robes draped around her as her warm brown eyes and sweet smile continued looking at the flames, before turning to Naruto. She is Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, home, and family. Looking at Naruto, her smile widened, to which Naruto mirrored. "Hello Naruto," greeted Hestia as she watched Naruto's smile widen before he went forward and sat down next to her. All the gods and goddesses sitting in their thrones were in their god form, towering over Naruto's current form of 5 feet. However, he was grateful that Hestia was also around the same as him in her form, which made it easier to chat with her. Hermes was currently distracted, talking to his snakes on his staff, so he didn't call out to Zeus just yet. "Hey Hestia, how are you?" grinned Naruto as he felt the flames of the hearth and was comforted by its presence. "I'm doing good Naruto. Thank you for asking. How about you?" she questioned, giggling slightly when Naruto sighed as he looked at all the gods and goddesses in the room for a few seconds before looking back at her to respond. "I was doing just fine before Hermes came to my home and interrupted my time with Irene and Urza. Rangaku and Yoruichi are coming back soon and I wanted to greet them. But it seems I might not be able to do that," he grumbled as he pouted at Hestia, who in turn giggled once more at his predicament. "And I'm still hungry. I was gonna ask Urza to make me more food. Sorry that we had to interrupt your time, but it is pretty important this time and I'm sorry that you couldn't feed the endless pit you call a stomach," smiled Hestia as she giggled once again at Naruto, adorably pouting at her true but mean comment. "Hey, my stomach is not an endless pit. My appetite is just larger than most others." He pouted. He couldn't help that he got hungry easily, and the fact that his female companions made good food was a combo that caused the household to constantly run out of food. Smiling at the blonde boy, Hestia pinched his cheek, to which he protested the act. "Stop. It hurts," whined Naruto as he struggled against Hestia's hand, before forcing her to let go of his cheek. Rubbing his cheek, he glared, more like a cute angry pout, at Hestia, who had a hand to her mouth, overing her mouth as she giggled. "Sorry. I'm sorry, but when you're in this form, you are very cute," teased Hestia. His child form was one of his best, and she enjoyed it when he went in it. "Irene wanted me to be in this form. And it was her turn of sleeping with me, so I did it," grumbled Naruto, lightly blushing at the thought of Irene. He would always comply with the requests his female companions gave him. "I might have to stop always listening to their requests," Naruto thought as his stomach rumbled, since he was still hungry. Remembering that he was hungry, Hestia, being the kind goddess she was, asked him for his request. "What would you like to eat, Naruto? I can make you whatever you want," she softly asked as Naruto made a thinking pose. The endless possibilities with Hestia's amazing cooking made Naruto think about all the different types of food to choose from. However, one food choice was always in his mind, and he wanted it. "Ramen," grinned Naruto, causing Hestia to sigh at his favorite food and conjured it up for him. Thanking the goddess, Naruto instantly dug into the dish he proclaimed to be the food of the gods. As he was slurping on his heavenly noodles, Hermes finished his conversation with his snakes and god Zeus's. "Attention! Silence!" shouted Zeus, causing all in the throne room to instantly be quiet. Looking at Hermes, Zeus motioned Hermes to speak. "Father, I have br." Just as Hermes was about to finish his sentence, he was interrupted by the sound of slurping. Naruto, being unable to resist against his most favorite food in the entire universe, couldn't hold it in anymore and slurped on his noodle, which in turn echoed throughout the entire room. Naruto sheepishly smiled at being the cause of the noise, while Zeus groaned at the occurrence. "Of course," groaned Zeus, slapping his hand into his face. He didn't really want to get help from the ramen addict, but desperate times call for desperate measures. However, the rest of the gods and goddesses had different expressions upon seeing the young blonde. Poseidon smiled at Naruto, being on friendly terms. Hera smiled gently at Naruto as well, being also on friendly terms and maybe a little more. Demeter beamed at one of her favorite immortals. Dionysus simply slept, blissfully unaware of what was happening. Athena sent Naruto a small smile, keeping her cool composure in front of the council. If it were just them alone, then maybe it would be a different story. Artemis also showed Naruto a small, yet gentle smile. She noticed the form he was in, but decided to keep her composure for the sake of keeping her reputation and avoiding unnecessary trouble with her little brother. Ares merely gave Naruto a nod. Respect between the two was established through fighting. Aphrodite gave Naruto a gentle yet bright smile, one devoid of intense lust. She also noticed his young form, but decided to fight the urges. Hephaestus nodded at Naruto's way before going back to tinkering with his trinkets. Apollo grinned widely his way as the two were great friends. And Hermes merely smiled his way before going to his god height to sit in his throne. Apollo, being the eccentric and perverted guy he was, decided to talk amidst Zeus's groaning. "Yo Naruto, how ya doing? You're in kid form, I see. I bet your lady friend's living with you, love it, huh?" Wiggling his eyebrows, Apollo grinned even wider when Naruto blushed at what he said, and he even continued with his little interrogation. "I bet they love it since you're more shy in this form, huh? How is it smashing for ho?" Before Apollo could finish, an arrow flew straight under his crotch, courtesy of Artemis. "Shut up, Apollo. No one wants to hear your perverted talk to Naruto. Don't spread your pig disease to him." Artemis did not want Naruto to be like the rest of these man-pigs, and she knew he wouldn't, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Otherwise she would have to resort to other more cruel methods. Pouting at his sister, Apollo quickly gained a mischievous look, knowing just what to say to rile his sister up, especially when it came to Naruto. Come on Lil, sis, how can I not be curious when Naruto lives with 4 hot chicks? I bet you would love to live with him to right. Artemis lightly blushed at what he said, but retaliated. Shut up. For the last time, I am not your little sister. Before Apollo could retort about Artemis not denying his claim, Zeus decided it was time to start the meeting. Enough. Now that Naruto is here, it is time we begin this important meeting. Zeus motioned for Naruto to stand up and stand in front of the council, which said blonde complied, while holding onto his ramen. So why was I called here? Questioned Naruto as he continued slurping on his noodles. Before Zeus answered his question, he used a bit of his energy to get the bowl out of his hand and blasted it into the bonfire, earning a shout from the ramen eater. Hey, that was mine. Stupid. Naruto pouted at his ramen being gone and he hoped Zeus didn't hear him what he whispered at the end, but the glare he got from the king of Olympus said otherwise. Don't eat while we are in session. I said this many times already, growled Zeus. Proclaiming ramen was the food of the gods was ridiculous enough already, but also proceeding to eat said monstrosity during a council meeting was over the line for him. Clearing his throat, Zeus proceeded to tell Naruto about the meeting. Anyways, I called you, Naruto, here today because I have a mission for you. It is one that you cannot refuse this time too. Getting a brow raise from the blonde, Zeus continued. You see, my master bolt has been stolen and I need you to find out who took it. Naruto did not expect this at all and in his mind, it was pretty hilarious. The king of Olympus, the mightiest of them all had his symbol of power stolen from him and he doesn't even know who took it. He quickly turned around and covered his mouth, trying to cover his giggles, but it was obvious to the gods and goddesses watching from the way his shoulder moves up and down that Naruto was laughing. The gods and goddesses, save for Zeus who was seething at Naruto's failed attempt at trying to hide his laugh and Dionysus who was still sleeping, either cracked a small smile at the situation in front of them or was inwardly amused. Some of them thought it was hilarious, especially a certain god of the seas, that Zeus had his bolt stolen but knew to keep it to themselves. Naruto, growled Zeus. He knew he had to deal with this when asking help from the troublesome blonde, but it still angered him. Quickly turning back, Naruto simply grinned and gave a quick sorry to avoid any unnecessary attacks or confrontations. As I was saying, I need you to investigate who stole it. It couldn't have been one of the Olympians as we can't take each other's symbols of power, so it has to have been one of he demigods from Camp Half-Blood. You should first check a boy called Percy Jackson. Zeus sent a small glare towards Poseidon who challenged him back with his own. Son of Poseidon. Oh wow. Poseidon had another child. Poseidon threw Naruto a sheepish smile his way. Naruto quickly brought his hands together and looked up, as if praying. I pray Amphitrite doesn't hurt the boy too hard when they meet. Several snorts were heard throughout the council at the ridiculous notion. After all, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades made an oath to not have any more demigod children. And Amphitrite happened to be Poseidon's wife and she loathes his bastard children. Poseidon coughed lightly to bring back the important matter and motioned for Zeus to continue. He didn't want his son dying and he knew that Percy was innocent, but Zeus was a paranoid bastard. So I need you to go to Camp Half-Blood, disguised as a demigod of their age and find out who stole my bolt, said Zeus. Excited about a stealth mission, Naruto quickly came up with some ridiculous ideas. Ooh, who should my godly parent be? Hera, you, Artemis. Those would be huge shocks to all the children there, exclaimed Naruto. If he were to infiltrate the camp as one of their own, then he had to bring shock and awe to the campers. Otherwise it wouldn't be fun, or stealth for that matter, but he didn't care too much. No, that would ruin everything, said Zeus. Looking around the council, Zeus motioned for any of the gods who had children. Does anyone here who has demigod children wish to bless Naruto so he can pose as one of your own? When he finished, Aphrodite, Apollo, Hermes, Athena, and Demeter raised their hands. It was logical that Naruto could be one of their own given the fact Naruto had blonde hair, and while Athena children mostly had gray eyes, it could still be with his blue ones. Pick one Naruto, motioned Zeus as Naruto thought about the choices given to him. If he were to pick Aphrodite, then he might cause some of the girls to constantly dote on him, which if one of his female companions found out, then it could get ugly, especially if Urza knew. Naruto shuddered at the thought of a jealous Urza. It was scary, and Artemis might castrate him for picking her as well. Not scary in the slightest. Apollo would also make sense, but he might try and persuade Naruto to do some bad and perverted things which could also lead to castration by a certain goddess of the hunt. Hermes would be pretty fun as he is known for being mischievous and causing pranks, which is a win in Naruto's book. But he also seemed to have heard that the Hermes cabin was overcrowded, which he didn't want to deal with. Naruto remembered meeting some of Athena's children and they were all too serious for his taste, so she was out of the question. And finally Demeter. She didn't have too many children so the cabins weren't too crowded. She does have a good reputation, so no castration. And she has awesome cereal, vegetables, and everything food related. I could make Irene and Urza freshly picked strawberry cake. I could also make Ran and Uru something too, thought Naruto as realization came into his head about who he was going to choose. I pick Demeter, shouted Naruto. Artemis and Hera nodded at his wise choice, happy that he chose a good candidate. Aphrodite and Athena were a little sad but knew that it was the right choice for him to make. Damn, I would have taken him out clubbing if he were mine, grumbled Apollo, only to whistle innocently and look away when several female glares were sent his way. Hermes merely chuckled at his fellow god. He kind of hoped Naruto would do pranks with his children, but that was for another time. Zeus nodded his head at Naruto's choice and motioned for Demeter to bless him. Okay Naruto. Demeter bless him now so he can be on his way. Nodding her head, Demeter chanted a few words before a light green aura appeared around Naruto, then vanishing after a few seconds. Since Naruto was already similar to Demeter appearance-wise, no physical changes happened. Should I just continue with this form or grow a little older? Questioned Naruto. The female goddesses said stay while the male gods merely nodded their heads. And do I have to go now? He hoped for the mission to start in a few days, but sadly, that wasn't the case. Today, you have until sundown to get ready before starting it. And do not use one of your clones to introduce yourself to camp. We all know what happened when you messed up your clone creation and made it start a certain mission. Naruto knew all too well what he meant and sighed in defeat. He just messed up creating the clone once and now it would forever be on his record. Meeting adjourned, and with that Zeus disappeared, along with Dionysus, who woke up at the sound of adjourned, Ares, and Hephaestus. The rest of the gods and goddesses simply went down to mortal height and walked to Naruto. Naruto, however, was slightly annoyed that he wouldn't get to go with Irene and Urza and spend time with them. Great, now I have to tell Irene and Urza I can't go with them when they were so happy about it too, but hey, at least he would get to greet Rengoku and Yoruichi before he had to leave. And he could always send a clone after he settled in camp. Meeting adjourned, and with that Zeus disappeared, along with Dionysus, who woke up at the sound of adjourned, Ares, and Hephaestus. The rest of the gods and goddesses simply went down to mortal height and walked to Naruto. Naruto, however, was slightly annoyed that he wouldn't get to go with Irene and Urza and spend time with them. Great, now I have to tell Irene and Urza I can't go with them when they were so happy about it too, but hey, at least he would get to greet Rengoku and Yoruichi before he had to leave. And he could always send a clone after he settled in camp. Present. As the gods made their way towards Naruto, Hestia, who got to him first, put one of her hands on his shoulder and smiled at him, her expression being one of apparent proud of her children for doing something right. Naruto, I'm proud of you for not getting too angry when Zeus zapped your ramen into the fire. It seems that you have matured a bit since we last met, she smiled. Naruto, who was still thinking about ways to confront Irene and Urza about the situation, snapped out of his stupor, and looked at Hestia. A little confused. My ramen? He questioned. Thinking back to what just happened a few moments ago, Naruto remembered that Zeus did indeed zap his godly ramen into the fire. He was mostly on autopilot during the conversation, as his brain was still muddled by the amazing food Illegimate and the STE. Amy he and Irene had in the bathroom. The meeting felt like a blur to him and he only was focused when Zeus told him he had to go to the camp. Just remembering Zeus doing that to his precious ramen was making his blood boil in rage. If he was concentrated on the conversation, then he would have retaliated against him. Naruto, do not attack any of the gods if they were to ruin your ramen. If you do that, then we won't be happy with that. Do you want us to be mad at you, dear master? Irene's voice echoed through his mind as he remembered that conversation with the rest of his female companions. The 4 of his female lovers knew of his ramen obsession and warned him to not provoke the gods if his ramen to be ruined. They would be mad and disappointed if he were to do so, and although Naruto was physically stronger than all 4 of his companions combined, mentally, while still in his child form, he was not. He liked the attention he got from them in this form, and if they were mad at him, then he would get none of that, which would crush him. Hestia, who was looking at him in a confused manner, poked Naruto's cheek, as he looked to be deep in thought. Poking him one last time seemed to do the trick as she saw Naruto seemingly force a smile on his face to address her statement earlier. Yeah, Hestia, I'm more mature now. Zeus was acting like a child and I was the bigger man in that situation. Naruto put his arms on his sides and titled his head up, as if waiting to be recognized for this astounding achievement. Hestia simply giggled at his actions, as it still looked like Naruto hadn't matured at all in this form, and simply didn't want to make his lovers angry at him. She knew, because of her domain in family, that Naruto loved his 4 companions dearly, and to add in his child form, he would not go against their wishes so they wouldn't get angry at him. The gods and goddesses finally made their way towards Naruto and Hestia, with Aphrodite suddenly crushing Naruto in her heavenly bosom as she squealed in delight. Oh my cute Naru, you're so cute in this form. I love it. Never change back, she screamed, further pushing Naruto's face into her huge S. Nowadays, Aphrodite would only let her sweet Naruto touch her, with all her children as of late being brain children. None of the other gods and goddesses knew of this, especially Ares, who was her supposed lover, but that was all fake. She would simply cast an illusion upon him, turning up her love and charm on him, so he would think he was having with her, but in reality he wasn't and never will. Same goes with all the other mortals she had, with to give the others the impression that she had her demigod children that way. Aphrodite still loved and did have tons of it back in the ancient Greek times, but ever since Naruto came into the equation, all of it stopped. She felt an attraction to him like no other, not even Adonis could compare to him, and she would relish it with the young blonde. Naruto blushed furiously as his head was smothered in her heavenly pillows. Her s were so soft around his head, that he felt like he could sleep in them like his other female lovers at home. However, he was starting to have trouble breathing and made motions for Aphrodite to let go of him, but he was seemingly ignored. The rest of the gods were watching in amusement at the scene, although Hera, Demeter, and Athena were a bit jealous at the affection their fellow goddess was showing to the blonde boy. They wanted to do that as well. Artemis, who had enough of Aphrodite smothering Naruto, forcefully removed both of them, and took Naruto into her arms. This time, however, she pressed the back of Naruto's head into her own large S, possessively claiming him as if he was hers alone. Stop that, you whore. Couldn't you see that Naruto didn't want to be in your ridiculous S? Artemis growled, as Aphrodite grew angry at her statement. Sure, she would have not cared about the whore comment decades centuries ago, but no, she was only focused on Naruto and did not want to be called that. In front of him. I'm not a whore, you virgin Girl Scout. Why are you holding on to like he's yours or something? Don't tell me the virgin man hater is in love with a male, smirked Aphrodite. Her smirk widened when Artemis blushed furiously at the proclamation. Naruto, who was still held in Artemis' arms, maintained his blush, unable to comprehend the heavenly situation he was currently in. Artemis's huge S were just as comfortable as Aphrodite's, and his other lovers at home. Artie, you love Naruto. How could you not tell me? Gasped Apollo in mock surprise. He knew long ago that Artemis had a huge crush on Naruto. Every time Naruto and Artemis interacted with each other, Apollo noticed Artemis being considerably friendly with him compared to the rest of the male populate. Ion. He also noticed how Artemis would blush whenever she would look at Naruto. Naruto's adult form would make Artemis blush like a schoolgirl given how his personality changes with each form he changes into. Apollo noticed that whenever Naruto was in his child form, Artemis would always shower him with affection like no other. Maybe his cuteness was too much for her and she needed to hug him. At least the hunt likes him as well, mused Apollo, as Artemis shouted his way screaming against his nonsense. He noticed within her shouting that she never directly stated that she didn't love Naruto. How strange. Now, let's settle down. I believe we should let Naruto go back home so he could get ready to go to camp later in the day, said Hestia, causing Artemis to form a small, adorable pout as she squeezed Naruto one more time in her arms, before reluctantly letting him go. Naruto stumbled a little as he got out of Artemis's arms. The on his head was too much from both goddesses one after the other and left him a little light-headed. His stumbling made its way towards Demeter, who quickly snatched him up in her arms towards her own large S. Naruto's face rested on top of her S as he looked up at her, with a dazed look that made him even more adorable. I'm sorry that you have to do this for us, Naruto. But we can't have Zeus's bolt missing or someone could use it against us, softly said Demeter, holding Naruto up with one arm, while stroking his soft, spiky locks with her other hand. Naruto could only nod, as her ministrations and soft S were making him a little drowsy. He could stay like this forever. Demeter held him a little while longer before letting him go from her arms. Hera crouched down towards Naruto's level, and he watched her large ass jiggle when she crouched down to his level. Her S looked even bigger as her knees came into contact with her S, pushing them a bit. Thank you for doing this again, Naruto. You have done so much for us and I'm so grateful for all your hard work. Hera decided to outdo the other goddesses and kisses him on his forehead. She held the kiss for a few seconds, before moving away. Hera giggled a little as she noticed Naruto looking at her with a dazed expression, as if in a dream, along with his atomic blush covering his face. He was no doubt the cutest person in the entire universe. The other goddesses pouted at not doing that with Naruto as they were too entranced by his cuteness and forgot to even give him a goodbye kiss. When you arrive in camp, you should go straight to Chiron so you could get more information. My daughter Annabeth can also help you as well, so please go look for her when you can, explained Athena, as she gave Naruto a soft smile. Naruto, somewhat, was able to gather his thoughts again and beamed at Athena, nodding at her instructions. Okay, Athena, you're one of the smartest people I know, so no doubt your daughter will be smart too. Said goddess blushed at his proclamation and struggled to fight against her urge to glomp him and have him all to herself. Coughing in her hand, all Athena could do was nod. Good luck, Naruto. I hope you can clear my boy's name. His name is Percy Jackson, and he is the only son of mine in camp, so it shouldn't be too hard to find him. Also, if you can, please give him some pointers on using a sword. I don't want him to die any time soon, said Poseidon, as he got a nod from Naruto. Good luck, bro. I'm sure you'll find who took Dad's bolt. And when you reach camp, I'm sure you will be popular with the ladies there. Apollo giggled pervertedly at Naruto, who in turn sweat dropped at his behavior. Naruto knew it was a bad idea to be friends with Apollo, who was a notorious playboy and loved to have with any hot woman he could find, but he also did have his good parts to him, sort of. What even are his good points? Thought Naruto as he started to question his and Apollo's friendship. He watched as the goddesses went and ripped Apollo a new one for his words, and he came to the conclusion that Apollo sort of reminded him of Jiraiya, his late godfather mentor from long ago. They were both playboys and perverts, so he felt some sort of connection with Apollo. Good luck, Naruto. Hermes' words snapped Naruto out of his thoughts and he looked at Hermes, who continued talking. When you get to camp, tell my children I said hi, especially my son Luke. Hermes' tone shifted towards a more somber one as he mentioned Luke, but he quickly moved on from it. Okay. Thanks everyone. I'll be sure to find Zeus's bolt, and when I'm done, we can all have ramen together," shouted Naruto as he waved at all of them before teleporting out of there to his house. "I'm going to have with him," dreamily sighed Aphrodite, before a fight between the goddesses, save for Hestia, broke out. Poseidon, Apollo, and Hermes chuckled at the sight, feeling a little sympathy for the blonde boy before all leaving. They did not want to get involved. Hestia, meanwhile, sighed at her family as she once again tried to appease the goddesses, who simply ignored her. Naruto's home. Naruto teleported outside of his house, noticing that his other two female companions, who were previously away from their mission, were back home, so he decided to enter through the house the human way to surprise them. "Hey, I'm back," shouted Naruto. As he walked through the entrance to his home, 4 women appeared from the dining room and walked towards him. One in particular practically flew towards Naruto. "Naru, you turned back into a cutie. My cute master," shouted a strawberry blonde woman as she glomped Naruto and pushed his head in her huge S. Said strawberry blonde was currently wearing a long black haori that was loosely tied, showing the INNER sides of her large S, along with a pink scarf hanging around her shoulder. They were both currently on the floor as Rangaku basically talked Naruto to the ground. "Rangaku, release master. You're hurting him," berated Urza as she noticed Naruto turning a little blue from the suffocation. Off to the side, Irene and a dark-skinned woman giggled at the common occurrence that always happened whenever their master transformed into a child. "Hooah, thanks Urza, and hello Rangaku, I missed you," grinned Naruto as he got his head out of Rangaku's bust and proceeded to wrap his tiny arms Rangaku, who kneeled on the ground and hugged her head to his tiny chest. Rangaku proceeded to squeal at the cute display of affection by her master and reveled in his soothing, yet intoxicating presence. After a few seconds, Naruto let go of Rangaku's head, which she whined at the loss of warmth, and he proceeded to walk up towards the dark-skinned woman. "Hey Yoruichi, I missed you too." Naruto looked up towards the now identified Yoruichi and smiled widely at her. Yoruichi bent down and hugged Naruto closely to her large S, smiling softly at her master. "It's good to see you too Naruto. I missed you as well," softly said Yoruichi as she rubbed his blonde hair with one arm. Yoruichi was currently dressed in a black undershirt with an orange overshirt that also strained against her large bust and black stretch pants. Her long purple hair was currently tied in a ponytail and her golden yellow eyes smiled longingly at her master. Irene, Urza, Rangaku, and Yoruichi made up Naruto's 4 female companions, lovers that lived with him. They served for his purpose and he commanded them for his purpose. Naruto did have other lovers and love interests as well, which the 4 ladies were open to and didn't care, so long as they had their master by them. There also seemed to be a trend as well. Naruto gravitated towards women with large S. Irene clasped her hands together in an excited fashion, remembering that they would go to hers and Urza's favorite bakeries when he came back. "All right, everyone is here. Naru, let's go get some cake," shouted Irene. Her and Urza pumped their fists in the air, happy about cake time, while the other 3 sighed at their eagerness for cakes. Irene. We might have to postpone that," sheepishly said Naruto, as Yoruichi stood up, still holding onto the blonde boy. Instantly, the pressure started to rise within the home, as Irene and Urza stopped and looked at their master. Forcing a smile, Irene merely closed her eyes and gestured for her master to continue. "I kind of have to go to Camp Half-Blood for a mission," he whispered, hoping that she wouldn't get too angry at that. Naruto was about to tell her to go with the other 3 ladies, but Irene started to talk. "When?" smiled Irene, still keeping her eyes closed. "When?" mirrored Naruto, a bit confused about her question. "When do you have to go?" she questioned. Irene still kept her eyes closed and a smile was still being forced by her. Naruto knew that if he messed up with his wording, then he would pay. Remembering the conversation between him and Zeus, Naruto decided to just state exactly what the King of Go.ds said to him. "I have until sundown to be there," said Naruto. Irene looked at the clock hanging on a wall, and saw that it was only 12 p.m. She inwardly thanked Urza for pestering Naruto to buy some decorations for their home, with the clock being 1. The pressure died down instantly as Irene and Urza sighed in relief. Sundown would be at approximately 8 p.m. during summer in New York. It was plenty of time to eat delicious cakes. Why didn't you say so sooner? Master, it's only 12 p.m. and sundown is at 8 p.m. so we have plenty of time to eat at our bakeries, scolded Irene. Naruto in return simply made a look of realization that they indeed did have a lot of time before his mission. He simply scratched his cheek and sheepishly smiled at the two redheads, saying a quick sorry for worrying them. Ooh, we can go shopping too. I need your opinion, my cute master, on what clothes I should get, shouted Rangaku in delight as she quickly snatched Naruto from Yoruichi's arms and held him in her bust. We have 8 hours, huh? Said Yoruichi, as she was thinking about splitting the time in an orderly fashion. 2 hours for eating, 2 hours for shopping, and the rest. A seductive smile made its way towards Yoruichi's face as she looked at her master, who looked at her back, confused as to why she was making that sort of face. 2 hours for eating, 2 hours for shopping, and 4 hours for some sweet service from us, purred Yoruichi, going to Naruto and blowing softly in his ear, eliciting a small eep from the blonde boy. Rangaku and Irene simply smiled seductively at that plan and nodded their heads in agreement. They needed to please their master before he went on the mission, and some sweet release was needed. Urza simply blushed at that, but nodded her head nonetheless in agreement. Naruto blushed a deep shade of red at the thought of the last 4 hours of their time before going to the camp. In his child form, he was a little more sensitive than his other forms, which Irene took advantage of in the morning. But with 4 women at the same time, he knew he would have to whip out the clones to keep up. He nodded at what Yoruichi, too embered and shy to say anything about it, which the 4 ladies beamed in happiness. Excellent. Now let's go get some food from the best bakeries in New York, shouted Irene. Come on, Naru. Teleport us into New York City so we can get there. Irene, Urza, and Yoruichi placed their arms on Naruto ready to leave. Do you ladies want to change? People in New York City dress differently and we might stand out. Irene merely waved her hand with no concern for Naruto's worries. Don't worry, my cute master. I'll just manipulate the mortals to make them indifferent to our attire. Irene winked at Naruto, who sighed at her laziness and nodded his head before teleporting all of them to Manhattan. Manhattan, New York City. Naruto teleported the 5 in a secluded alleyway in the middle of Midtown Manhattan as an extra precaution to not be seen by any mortals. He could have just instantly teleported them to any bakery Irene or Urza desired, but he enjoyed walking with them. As they left the alleyway, tall buildings came into view from all around them. New York City was after all known as the concrete jungle, and these tall buildings that spanned the entire land enforced the name. Ooh, we are near one of my favorite bakeries, exclaimed Urza, eager to get to the spot as quickly as possible with her master. She took Naruto from Rangaku and proceeded to take him there in her arms. Naruto knew that the women enjoyed having him in their arms, so he decided to not be against it, but embrace it. It was a win for his ladies and a win for himself. Come on, Irene, Yoruichi, Rangaku, hurry up. We still have more bakeries to visit, shouted Urza. The 3 women giggled at the happiness practically emanating from the younger redhead and proceeded to catch up. This was one of the times where Urza would truly show her colors, and they knew her obsession with cakes and sweets was on par with Naruto's obsession with ramen. 2 hours later, 5 bakery shops later, a very satisfied Urza and Irene walked on as they stuffed themselves with all the delicious strawberry cakes and desserts each bakery had to offer. All the bakery owners were always shocked by just how much the 2 redheads could consume whenever they visited, and the other customers were gobsmacked by the sheer volume of desserts they ordered. Yoruichi, Rangaku, and Naruto only ate a few desserts from each bakery, as that much sugar could only be tolerated for so long. Naruto was currently being held by Rangaku as said strawberry blonde eagerly browsed the designer stores on 5th Avenue. There were so many stores to choose from in a small span of 2 hours, so she had to pick the best ones. Money was no problem for any of them, as the missions they do for their clients, whether it be mortals or immortals, always brought in tons of cash and other goods. Choosing a store, Rangaku, Naruto, and the other 3 ladies walked in to buy some clothes. The 4 ladies found this time to be the perfect opportunity to give the blonde boy a delightful teaser as to what would happen 2 hours later, and thankfully, this store had a lot of skimpy lingerie and clothing for them to display to their master. Wow! Gulped Naruto as he sat on a chair in the dressing room of the store. His eyes were roaming all over the 4 women's body with a blush covering his face. Their outfits were very skimpy that showed all the curves and left a lot to the imagination. Fufufu, you like my cute master, giggled Rangaku as she was dressed in white lingerie with white stockings that accentuated his large ass and her shapely hips. Bending forward, Rangaku made sure to push her arms together to push her ass out as they were straining against the lingerie. She battered her eyes and smiled seductively as she let out a small moan to further get a reaction out of Naruto. Naruto could only nod his head as his eyes were transfixed on her large ass. He could see the valley in between her and he wanted to smother them badly. He looked up to see her expression and gulped once again in anticipation, already wanting to go back home with her. No fair, Rangaku, we have to show Naru our clothes too. 3 curtains were opened and Naruto expected some of them to show off some clothes to wear in public, but it seemed like the Y all had the same idea to show off some skimpy lingerie. Irene stepped out wearing a crimson bra that looked to be a size too small as it pushed up against her already large ass, making them look even bigger. Coupled with a red thong that barely covered her snatch, Naruto could see a little bit of her natural red hair that was above her womanhood. Her toned stomach and wide birthing hips made her look like a hot MILF waiting to be ravaged upon. Yoruichi wore black lingerie that only covered her nipples and wrapped behind to her back. The black lingerie worked well with her skin tone as it kind of looked like from Naruto's point of view that she was basically. Her was covered by a thin piece of black lingerie that Naruto could make out her clit. Her toned stomach and thighs really made her all the more divine in Naruto's eyes. Finally, Erza was dressed in a pink one-piece lingerie that split down the middle and converged at her. She was a little more nervous than the others and fidgeted slightly under the gaze of her master, but that only enhanced her overall figure as her large ass jiggled slightly, and if she did it at a faster rate, her nipples could eventually slip out. Her toned thighs and shapely hips just further enhanced her beauty overall. As Naruto continued to be entranced by the 4 divine women upon him, their gazes looked down Naruto's body and they noticed a particularly large tent from his pants. They all liked their lips at the prize that would await them, as even in his child form, Naruto still packed a large package, especially in his tiny body. Naruto noticed where his women's eyes traveled to and let out a small gasp at his boner. He quickly covered it with his hands, which earned himself 4 moans of disappointment. Should WWE go back home now? Stuttered Naruto. His blush was still maintained and he looked down at the floor, unable to look at them as his boner was starting to become a little painful. The 4 women nodded their heads in agreement at his question, and even though they spent around 30 minutes in the store, the extra hour and 30 minutes would go a long way to satisfy their desires. Irene conjured up a teleportation circle under them and left money on the floor for their items. Easy manipulation would make that seem to be a normal purchase in the eyes of the mortals within the store, and no complications would arise from such an action. Finishing the circle, the 5 beings left the store back to their home, more specifically, Naruto's bedroom. Naruto's bedroom, Lemon. Naruto was pushed onto the large bed behind him as the 4 women slowly crawled onto the bed, looking as if a predator was stalking its prey. Before he could do anything, Irene quickly flanked him from his left side and pulled him into a searing kiss, all while taking off his shirt to show his toned body with traces of baby fat and his cute pink nipples. While Irene was making out with Naruto, Erza and Rangaku pulled his pants and boxers off to see his 7-inch spring to life in front of them. Licking their lips, they noticed the small amount of pee coming from his tip and Erza immediately went in to lick it. Rangaku worked the side and base of his shaft, and fondled his balls gently, all the while Naruto bucked his hips, feeling the immense the two brought. Yoruichi was on the right side of Naruto and licked her lips at her master's cute nipples. She knew that he was sensitive there and his moans would be music to her ears. Gently licking his right nipple, a sharp moan was heard from Naruto as he was still making out with Irene. She then went in and started to on his nipple, gently biting it as well. All of this stimulation at once was proving to be too much for Naruto to handle because a little over 3 minutes after they started, Urza and Rengoku felt his twitch and heat up a little more, a sign that he was about to blow. Grinning in anticipation, Urza and Rengoku worked harder on his shaft, and Rengoku sealed the deal when she brought a finger into Naruto's hole and gently pushed a bit in. During the kiss between Irene and Naruto, Naruto couldn't handle it anymore and allowed Irene to dominate his mouth as he let out a large moan in her mouth and proceeded to spray his jizz into the waiting mouths of Urza and Rengoku. That was too much for Urza and Rengoku to handle as some of it flew onto his stomach, to which Yoruichi was quick to slurp up, and the rest were dripping down Urza and Rengoku's mouths. Naruto panted as Irene stopped their make-out session and she proceeded to go towards Urza. Yoruichi also stopped with her work on his nipple and moved towards Rengoku. All Naruto could do was watch with cloudy eyes as Irene and Yoruichi started to kiss Urza and Rengoku respectively to get the Ning that was in their mouths. Was being ped in the mouths as the heavenly essence they so desired and sought after was going down their throats. The lesbian act between the women was already starting to make Naruto hard again. Soon, he was back at full mast, just waiting to be devoured again, and the women noticed it and stopped their little act. Yoruichi, with her cat-like movement, was able to reach Naruto's first and she instantly hovered over his body and pierced her wet cunt with his. Oh yes. A loud moan escaped Yoruichi as she felt full again after a months away from his heavenly spear. She moved her hips and started to ride Naruto. His was hitting all of her sweet spots and Yoruichi was left a moaning mess. Rengoku made her way to start a make-out session with Naruto as he grabbed her big and fondled them. Irene proceeded to kiss Yoruichi while she was still on his and also had one hand furiously fingering her own dripping snatch. Urza proceeded with fingering her own cunt as well, but decided to on Yoruichi's bouncing that needed much love. Naruto knew that they were going to have hot steamy for a while and just him wouldn't be able to satisfy all of them at the same time. 3 poofs were heard around the bed, causing Rengoku, Irene, and Urza to turn at the sound and they all licked their lips at what happened. 3 identical Narutos in his child form were conjured up, all with the same erect 7-inch, and all with the cute form they wanted to devour. The 3 Narutos, which were all blood clones from Naruto, were made to last for hours on end of endless, something which was certainly needed in this situation. The women were still in the same spots they were at as the clones made their way towards them and proceeded to impale them from behind. Irene had stopped kissing Yoruichi and proceeded to have her hands on the bed as Naruto grabbed her large swaying from behind and ed her hard, leaving her have an ahegao expression on her face. It feels so good. Me harder, screamed Irene as drool started to escape her mouth. That was out of this world for her and she would never get tired of this feeling. A loud moan was heard throughout the room as Urza was being ed brutally from the back. The clone in her also proceeded to give her fat juicy hard slaps as she was a masochist waiting to be punished. Please punish me harder, master. I deserve it. Urza gave a loud screech as Naruto gave her an even harder slap on the. Her was quickly becoming more and more red and the clone also proceeded to roughly pull her hair back, further enhancing the for her. Rengoku's large were swaying above the original Naruto's face as she was being ed in the instead of her. Oh master, this naughty harder. It feels amazing, shouted Rengoku as her moans increased in frequency every time Naruto pushed in and out. The moans became even louder when the Naruto clone decided to also finger her dripping. From both holes left Rengoku unable to talk any further and made her a moaning mess. The original Naruto felt Yoruichi's tighten, signaling that her release was near, and his was also close as well. Naru, I'm close. Let's together. Panted Yoruichi, as she felt enclosing in and she knew it would be hard. After a few more thrusts, Yoruichi gave a high-pitched scream as rocked her world. Followed with Naruto Ming inside of her made her eyes roll back and tongue out as she spasmed out of control. Leaked out of her as it was too much for her to hold inside, and Yoruichi was left a twitching mess as Naruto's was still inside her. The original Naruto was left feeling a little lightheaded after the amazing he experienced and felt from within Yoruichi. He looked around and noticed the same expressions on his three other lovers, and the sight itself caused his to harden again within Yoruichi, which she felt and left a small moan as a result. He knew that there were many more rounds for them left to go before he had to leave, and he proceeded to continue. A few minutes later, 3 high-pitched screams were heard in the bedroom as Irene, Urza, and Rengoku fell onto the bed with their S in the air with each clones. Their eyes were rolled up their head as drool was going onto the bed sheets. 4 more poofs were heard, but the 4 women paid no mind to it as their mind was currently occupied by the mind-blowing S they received. But in the back of their heads, they knew that round 2 was coming up, and this time, they were going to be filled in both holes. The rounds would continue on with each round conjuring up another clone and another clone after that, until they ped out from the. Good thing they lived in the forest as their screams echoed throughout it, and any animals that were close by soon evacuated by the loud noises being made within the house. No other man would be able to satisfy these 4 women as Naruto claimed them as their own and ruined them for any other. Good thing he was also in his child form as well as if he were in his adult form, then they would be going at it for much longer with an even larger. Hopefully I make it to camp in time, thought the original Naruto as the one riding him now was Urza. Her stomach, along with the other women's stomach, were a little bloated as filled them inside. It looked like they were breeding stock with the amount of inside of them and the expressions they looked as if they were bound to being S. This continued for hours on end and sundown was quickly approaching. Naruto hoped that Kirin wouldn't be too mad at him if he arrived a bit later to camp. He hoped. Thanks for watching.